In southern Africa lies Zimbabwe, a nation once celebrated as the breadbasket of Africa. Its fertile lands produced enough to feed its people and export to neighbors, symbolizing hope and prosperity after independence. But this promise was shattered. Once bountiful fields became barren and the economy spiraled into hyperinflation. How did a country with such potential fall so far? The roots of Zimbabwe's crisis run deep: colonial exploitation, a brutal liberation war, and unresolved land inequality. The failure to address land ownership would haunt the nation, unraveling its social and economic fabric. To understand Zimbabwe's journey, we must look beyond headlines, tracing its story from ancient kingdoms to the present. This is a tale of pride, pain, and a nation's enduring hope for a better future. Long before colonization, the land was home to powerful civilizations, most notably the Kingdom of Zimbabwe. At its heart stood Great Zimbabwe, a stone city and capital of a vast trading empire. Its Shona rulers controlled trade routes, amassing wealth from gold, cattle, and agriculture. The city's massive granite walls, built without mortar, still stand as a testament to African ingenuity. Great Zimbabwe thrived on trade, exchanging gold and ivory for luxuries from India, China, and Persia. Its decline remains debated. Environmental change and shifting trade routes likely played a role. Though abandoned, its legacy endures. The modern nation's name honors this ancient heritage. Zimbabwe's story begins with greatness, innovation, and sovereignty. The late 1800s brought a wave of British colonization to southern Africa, spearheaded by the ambitious Cecil Rhodes and his British South Africa Company. Driven by dreams of empire and the lure of vast mineral wealth, Rhodes and his followers pushed deep into the heart of the continent, seeking to claim land and resources for the British Crown. The Shona and Ndebele peoples, who had lived on these lands for generations, fiercely resisted the invaders. But despite their courage and determination, they were ultimately overpowered by superior weaponry and tactics. Their ancestral lands were seized and the territory was renamed Rhodesia in honor of its colonial architect. Under colonial rule, a rigid system of racial segregation was established. Fertile land and economic opportunities were reserved almost exclusively for white settlers, while millions of Africans were forced into overcrowded, impoverished reserves. This system shaped every aspect of life, from where people could live to the work they could do. Political power was kept firmly in the hands of the white minority, creating a society deeply divided by race, privilege, and law. Black Africans were denied meaningful representation and excluded from decision-making, fueling resentment and a growing desire for change. In 1965, determined to maintain white dominance, Ian Smith's government unilaterally declared independence from Britain. This bold move was intended to block the transition to majority rule, but it triggered international outrage and harsh economic sanctions. Supported by apartheid South Africa, the Rhodesian regime clung to power for more than a decade, relying on military strength and regional alliances to suppress opposition and maintain control. For black Zimbabweans, Smith's declaration was not just a political act, it was a declaration of war. It signaled that freedom and equality would not be handed over peacefully, and that the struggle for liberation would be long and costly. The stage was set for a protracted and bloody conflict. Guerrilla fighters took to the bush, villages were destroyed, and families were torn apart as the fight to reclaim land and rights intensified. The seeds of future conflict and revolution were sown in these years of dispossession, resistance, and unyielding hope for a better future. The fight for Zimbabwe's soul had truly begun, setting the stage for a nation's long journey toward freedom and self-determination. With peaceful change blocked, African nationalist movements turned to armed struggle. ZANU, led by Robert Mugabe, and ZAPU, led by Joshua Nkomo, launched a guerrilla war from neighboring countries. The Rhodesian Bush War raged for nearly 15 years, devastating the country and its people. Guerrillas gained rural support, while the regime responded with brutal counterinsurgency tactics. Civilians suffered most, thousands killed, many more displaced. By the late 1970s, sanctions and war costs weakened the regime. White emigration soared. Mozambique's independence gave ZANU a crucial base, intensifying the conflict. International pressure forced negotiations at Lancaster House in 1979. The resulting agreement ended the war, restored British control, and paved the way for free elections. Zimbabwe's long-awaited independence was finally within reach. In 1980, Robert Mugabe's ZANU won a landslide victory, promising reconciliation, unity, and a new era of progress for Zimbabwe. The country's independence was met with jubilation and hope as Mugabe called for peace among all races and pledged to heal the wounds of colonial rule. The early years saw major investments in education and healthcare, with new schools and clinics opening across the nation. These reforms raised literacy rates and life expectancy, making Zimbabwe a model for post-colonial development in Africa. But beneath the surface, Mugabe soon moved to eliminate rivals. In the early 1980s, he targeted Nkomo Zapu in the brutal Gukurahundi campaign. Thousands of Ndebele civilians were killed, leaving deep scars that still haunt the nation. By 1987, Zimbabwe was effectively a one-party state under Mugabe's absolute rule, with dissent silenced and opposition parties marginalized. Land reform, the liberation struggle's core promise, stalled for years. Most fertile land remained in white hands, fueling frustration among the black majority and sowing seeds of future conflict. Facing growing opposition and economic decline in the late 1990s, Mugabe launched chaotic land seizures in 2000, encouraging war veterans to forcibly take over white-owned farms. The result was agricultural collapse, widespread food shortages, and an economy spiraling into freefall, devastating rural communities. Hyperinflation soared, unemployment skyrocketed, and daily life became a struggle for survival as basic goods vanished from shelves. Once known as the breadbasket of Africa, Zimbabwe could no longer feed itself, and millions faced hunger. Corruption and mismanagement deepened the crisis, turning hope into despair and eroding trust in government institutions. Zimbabwe's dream of independence had become a nightmare, with the promise of freedom replaced by hardship and fear. The nation's wounds grew deeper under Mugabe's rule, leaving a legacy of pain, resilience, and a longing for true renewal. As Zimbabwe's crisis worsened, opposition grew, especially from the MDC, led by Morgan Tsvangirai. The 2008 election saw Tsvangirai win the first round, but violence and intimidation forced him to withdraw. Mugabe's regime clung to power, blaming Western sanctions for the country's woes and deepening isolation. By 2017, Mugabe's succession crisis split ZANU-PF between his wife Grace and Deputy Emmerson Mnangagwa, the crocodile. When Mugabe fired Mnangagwa, the military intervened. Tanks rolled into Harare and Mugabe was placed under house arrest. Zimbabweans celebrated in the streets as Mugabe resigned after 37 years in power. Mnangagwa became president, promising reform and a new era. But this was no revolution, just a reshuffling of the ruling elite. The fundamental power structures remained unchanged. Zimbabwe's future was still uncertain. Today, Zimbabwe remains at a crossroads, still haunted by the legacy of Mugabe's rule. The echoes of the past continue to shape the present, casting a long shadow over the nation's hopes and ambitions. Hopes for economic revival under President Mnangagwa have faded for many. Inflation and unemployment remain stubbornly high, and daily life is a struggle for countless Zimbabweans. The promise of prosperity has yet to materialize, leaving families anxious about their future. Corruption persists at multiple levels, undermining trust in institutions, while the agricultural sector continues to struggle to recover from the chaotic land reforms of the past. Many once productive farms now lie fallow, and rural communities face ongoing hardship. Many new farmers lack the resources, training and support needed to succeed, leaving food security fragile and communities vulnerable to hunger and poverty. The government's efforts to revitalize agriculture are slow and fraught with challenges, often hampered by bureaucracy and limited funding. Progress is uneven, and frustration grows among those waiting for meaningful change. Yet amid hardship, Zimbabwe's youth are increasingly vocal and engaged, refusing to accept the status quo. They are determined to shape a different future for themselves and their country. Armed with social media and a hunger for change, they challenge the old order and demand accountability from leaders. Their voices are growing louder, inspiring hope and stirring debate across the nation. This new generation offers hope for transformation, though risks remain in a repressive political climate. Their courage and optimism are a beacon, but the path forward is uncertain and fraught with obstacles. Zimbabwe's story is one of squandered promise, but also of remarkable resilience and deep pride in its heritage. The spirit of its people endures, even in the face of adversity. True recovery will require confronting the past honestly and embracing genuine reform, with leaders and citizens working together for a better tomorrow. The nation's future rests in the hands of its people and their enduring hope for better days as they strive to build a Zimbabwe that fulfills its vast potential.